The next Mario Kart game got announced before I finished this tier list. And it's been 7 months since the last part! Okay, let's not waste any more time then. Today we are covering the final 3 parts of the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass. As always, this is analysis of track design from a player with nearly 1,000 hours of experience. I welcome all feedback in the comments. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So Amsterdam is a hot mess of a track. Now whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing really depends on the kind of person that you are. If you want a track that's difficult but fun to master, then yeah, you'll like this track. If you want a track that's easy to understand and to sight read, oh, you're gonna be in for a rough time. Do you want a tour track to just try something different? Then you might like it. Amsterdam starts in this rural area that feels like it could be right out of Moonview Meadows, which right out the gate sets it aside pretty well. And the second lap immediately decides to up the ante by taking you underwater in this canal section. And it's certainly nothing if not unique, but man if it does not feel incredibly awkward to drive. Not only is it underwater, making you slide all over the place, but it's also incredibly narrow, and the turns are incredibly sharp. Oh, and did I mention there's a bunch of water currents pushing you in all sorts of directions while you're trying to handle all this? And while all these obstacles normally, on their own, make for a very fun and meaningful challenge to overcome, on this section in particular, it can sometimes feel out of your own control and it's very frustrating. But thankfully, these problems quickly go away as soon as lap 3 starts, as you make this small, albeit a little bit blind, leap into this pretty flower field. Or at least I think it's pretty, because I really like this low poly aesthetic. This flower field is significant because it then holds what are essentially the 2 final shortcuts of the track, followed by 1 more set of item boxes, and a small set of surprisingly chaotic turns, which against all odds somehow leads to this track having some cinematic endings. Overall, I would say that this track does stick the landing, but it does so in this really awkward stumble that isn't ever exactly what you want. But since my thoughts seem to be all over the place, why don't I get some insight from someone who actually lives there? Take it away, Tumis.
So, we're looking at Amsterdam Drift, huh? At least that's what it likes to call itself. But let me pull back the curtains here and reveal an ugly truth to you all. Nintendo lied to you. Despite being named after the capital of the Netherlands, it would be more accurate to refer to it as a frankly despicable misconstrued image. And no, I'm not just talking about the trains looking like this instead of the beautiful yellow and blue they actually are. In fact, this color scheme might just be a beautifully subtle nod to the Dutch flag. And same could be said for the trams, which are white and blue in real Amsterdam, but in Mario Kart they're orange, the national color. I'm also not talking about the fact that there's not even a single biker around running a red light and yelling at you to kijk uit je doppen man, vuile klauwviel. Ik hoop dat jij en je moeder allebei de zwaarste tyfus krijgen. I'm talking about this. You enter the I-tunnel, which should take you to the very picturesque Amsterdam North, but we ended up over 10 kilometers further northwest in Zaanstreschans, which, mind you, isn't even in Amsterdam. And just before you pass by the Rijksmuseum, we have Keukenhof. Not only is that a whopping 25 kilometers away, not only is it not in Amsterdam, but it's not even in the same province. Imagine if New York Drift took you to North Bergen, New Jersey. Riots would break out all over the world, society as a whole would crumble. I say we make a stance for this blatant misrepresentation of the land of Gouda cheese and licorice. The world calling the entire nation Holland is bad enough, but everyone lumping everything in Amsterdam is a growing issue, and one to take seriously. The Dutch are sick and tired of this toxic generalization. Amsterdam this, Amsterdam that, but what about the rest of the country? What have you done, Nintendo, and for what purpose? But is it an enjoyable track? Oh fuck yes it is. Back to you, TJ.
GBA Riverside Park. This is probably the GBA track that I'm probably most disappointed in. Not to say I think it's the worst GBA track, but that I wanted more from. I think it's perfectly acceptable as is, but there's a missed opportunity of including one of my more favorite GBA shortcuts where you have a very narrow slip of road, because I think I can cite this as being a mild problem. But not even just this, but the fact that it kind of lacks shortcuts in general. Because the first few sections, there are a few, but otherwise, I feel like, unless there's a blue shell, you can go into the final half of the course, kind of just feeling like, okay, yeah, I'm safe, I have won this race pretty much. Like, there's not really a risk that you feel at that point. And for as interesting of a concept as these Piranha plants are, they really don't do anything. But thankfully, due to just how short this track is, it doesn't have time to get boring. So even though there's a lot of missed potential here, I can't say that I end up minding all that much. Oh boy, DK Summit. Oh baby. Oh my god. Alright. DK Summit is so good. It feels weird to put DK Summit so high, because DK Summit genuinely does feel like a carbon copy of what I like about Snowland, because it's another Wii track where they respected the expert shortcut. But they made it different, and I feel like that is something that makes it a little bit more fun. And I don't really know how to describe it, but it always feels extremely satisfying. That said, I think because of the way that it is implemented, where unlike Snowland, which requires you to have a mushroom in order to reap the rewards of the expert shortcut, DK Summit a little bit, just a little bit, kind of gets Hyrule Circuit vibes, where new players aren't gonna know how to do the expert shortcut. But unlike the Hyrule Circuit one, I feel like the goal of the DK Summit one is much more clear. I feel like a newer player watches someone do the expert shortcut, and if they really care about Mario Kart in any meaningful capacity, if they have any desire to come back to it, they're gonna see someone do the DK Summit shortcut, they're gonna be interested in learning that shit, because that shit's stylish as hell. It's genuinely so satisfying and so cool looking to do, compared to like this dinky little, like, you hop over off-road that happens in Hyrule Circuit that saves like probably more time than even the Summit shortcut. There's a very large contrast to be made there. I think I speak for most people when I say that getting better in an ideal world should be fun. And the DK Summit double cut just plops itself down in the middle of broad daylight for anyone to learn, as this just low barrier entry point into learning some of the more advanced stuff this game has to offer. Because I genuinely think anyone can learn this shortcut with just a couple minutes in time trial. And if anything, the shortcut has been dumbed down compared to the version in Wii. And hell, it even keeps the same dynamic of allowing you to course correct if things don't line up the way you want them to. But one thing's for sure, if you commit to the double shortcut, you better be confident, because if you fail, you suffer one of the worst respawn timers in all of Mario Kart 8. But yeah, similar to that Hyrule Circuit shortcut I like bringing up so much, if you know how to do the shortcut, there is literally no reason to do anything else. And if you don't, you are just blatantly at a massive disadvantage just for failing a knowledge check. And that problem only gets worse when you also factor in the knowledge of knowing how to take the half pipes. And while I would love to just point and laugh at whoever refuses to learn this kind of thing, saying something like, "Here's a tissue for your skissue, nerd," I completely understand if this isn't your kind of thing. Especially because this track is held together by scotch tape and miracles. It's a janky and erratic mess, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Now let me talk to you about Yoshi's Island. Way back at the beginning of this ranking, I mentioned that I feel like I have pretty good objective criteria for ranking every single track in this game, with the exception of two of them. The first being Moo Moo Meadows, because of the serotonin release of seeing cow on menu select screen, but the other one is Yoshi's Island. And Yoshi's Island, I would tell you a little bit about why I think Yoshi's Island is a good track or why it's a bad track, if I wasn't too distracted by the fact that it pays so much fucking respect to the source material of Yoshi's Island. I want to cry. Every time I see Poochie, I remember that everything in life is going to be okay. I wish that I recorded my first time reaction to this track, but the way I popped off when I realized, first of all, that when you enter the course, you have the level starting little, like, drum beat that happens in Yoshi's Island, the dun 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 dun, and then the fact that finishing a race on it gives you the level end music. Oh my god, I don't know if I remember a happier day in my life. Hyperbole, of course, hyperbole. Putting all of that behind us, what are we left with? Well, in my experience, this track tends to give pretty good races overall. There's pretty bountiful number of grass cuts you can take in order to gain spots. I feel like the most notable shortcut this track tends to have is on the left side when you're exiting the volcano, and that transitions me into my biggest problem with this track, because you probably just heard me call this the most notable shortcut on this track, and immediately began to ready a pitchfork at me. TJ, I trusted you. Why won't you talk about how brilliant and good the cloud shortcut is? And that's because it's a good idea done kind of disappointingly. Don't get me wrong, it's an amazing idea, and it's really fun to be able to do well. But the problem is that you don't really need to. Because as soon as one other person activates that cloud, everyone else in the entire race is going to be able to take this path. If the bridge that you activate on this section was entirely for yourself, and did not apply on anyone else's screen, this would be the 10 out of 10 shortcut that everyone wants to call it. But otherwise, these are small nitpicks on a track that otherwise deserves every bit of praise that has ever gotten. What do you think, Casey?
Hey, it's Brief Casey, and even though I don't play it as often as other games, I like Mario Kart 2, so why the hell not? Anyways, TJ, I kind of disagree about the shortcut. Now, I'm no competitive Mario Kart expert, but part of me wants to say that if it were only for the person who activated it, or maybe even the team in a team race, then I feel like the track would risk falling into the pitfall of the base game tracks to where it gives the frontrunner a sustained advantage. As a result, I feel like everyone being able to take it balances out to some extent. With that out of the way, let's go to what I love about this, starting with a little side note about the track itself. It just always feels so satisfying to do drifts on this track, especially at the start. It also feels like there's some decent room for error, and it's a bit thrilling making sure you don't hit any enemies in the process. The shortcuts are also well placed and feel very satisfying to go through, especially the one going out of the cave, which ties very nicely into a drift. These types of shortcuts are one reason why it feels good to race on this track. I also agree with you on how much love was put into this track, right down to the musical cues. Not only does it feel like the same love and attention to detail you'd see in Smash put into a Mario Kart track, but I feel like it highlights the potential of how this could work for other corners of the Mario universe, which until now was something we only saw with the crossover tracks. Can you imagine if we got the same level of love for tracks based on, say, Paper Mario, WarioWare, or even a better exploration of Luigi's Mansion? We could even see a track calling back to Diddy Kong Racing, like going through different parts of Timber Island. Kirby may be my most wanted non-Mario character in a future game because of the past crossovers, but if they did more homages to the Mario universe, I'd gladly take it. It's something we haven't really seen much of since the GameCube and Wii era, and just seeing a touch of that attention to detail come back is the other major reason why it's always great to race on this track.
Bangkok has kind of aged poorly for me. When it first came out, it was kind of one of the most exciting city tracks that we've gotten. After all, it was the first and only city track that I felt like I kind of had trouble sight reading. And to most people, that's usually a sign of a track that doesn't communicate its turns well enough. To me, that indicates a complexity that's really fun to learn. But once I've learned it, I feel like it has one shortcut of note, and it doesn't really even save that much time even if it is really fun. Otherwise, the only thing that really stands out is the section where you can choose between taking the upper and lower route, because the lower route is the faster one to take, but I'm often surprised by how many times I feel like taking the upper route to either get coins, items, or just to avoid the pack. Otherwise, say it with me now, Mario Kart 8 syndrome. Lack of opportunity for item play, lack of ways to catch up, very samey races. Now DS Mario Circuit, this is another just solid all around, does everything right circuit track. Up there with Yoshi Circuit, genuinely. It's really good. I never really got to experience DS Mario Circuit because DS was the last Mario Kart game that I ever got to play. And as a result, it was a very pleasant surprise to learn that this track is a banger. And it had a lot of really, cheaty off-road shortcuts you can take. The last section has really tight turns that, with some mushroom usage, you can get even crazier with. It definitely has an appeal unlike any other, and it definitely deserves a spot in S tier. And we have Waluigi Stadium. Waluigi Stadium is done well. I like it a lot. It's fun. A fun track that I enjoy racing. It's the first track that actively makes good use out of half pipes. Well, that's not true, actually. DK Summit does a little bit, but it's another track that does. And there are a lot of different styles you can implement on Waluigi Stadium. I was really worried that by adding slippery physics into Waluigi Stadium, that they were going to fundamentally ruin the track and it was going to feel like trash. But I think after a few races I got used to it, and more than that, I realized there's a lot of things that Waluigi Stadium has that add to its style a lot. Particularly the thing that I will always point to is there's that one turn right after the half pipe section where if you climb up the half pipe but don't actually take it on the left side, you can mini turbo onto the section that's normally only accessible from the outside line half pipe, which would normally be much slower to get to. And here, technically it's not faster, but man, does it look cool and stylish, and does it feel fun. And it also has that one really cool wall shortcut. Waluigi Stadium got style. I didn't ever really even like it that much in Wii, but in this game, they found a way to make Waluigi Stadium not only just as good as it was in Wii, but to add a shit ton more style in the process, and I love that. Even if it is a track that a time trialer can completely dominate without opposition. It's just kind of too bad that style does not equate to substance. Singapore is yet another eye candy track. This one less fun than 3DS Rainbow Road. I don't like racing Singapore. It's another track that just has a large lack of any meaningful item interaction. It feels very static in how races tend to go. As a result of that, it's very pretty to look at, sure, but it can be very unfun to race, because if you're not in contention, if you don't stay in contention with the person in first, then it just kind of becomes like, okay, well, nothing I do really matters at this point. The kind of classic Mario Kart 8 syndrome. Been a while since I brought up that phrase, because most of these tracks are very good at avoiding it. Singapore does not. It is a very narrow track that doesn't have a lot of shortcuts, and the ones that it does have are pretty minuscule and don't affect the race in a major grand scheme of things. You can get a couple spots with the one at the very end, but it's not a lot. Athens Dash. This is a weird one. It feels good. I don't have too strong of opinions on it. I pretty much always vote for it. The more I think about it, the more I think no complaints Athens Dash. Athens Dash is an A-tier track. It feels like it has its own dynamic. It's the only track in the game that I know of that rewards you for holding a mushroom with one extra set of item boxes that other people wouldn't get. And I feel like that's really interesting. Otherwise, the set piece is just very interesting. The terrain feels unlike any other track in the game. It feels great. I like it a lot. Don't have too much more to add on top of that. I just think it's a great track with a lot of verticality and not too much to complain about. Then we get to Daisy Cruiser. Daisy Cruiser, I think, it fits hand in hand with Maple Treeway in the fact that it's as inoffensive of a track as you can get. There's not really a way to mess this one up. It does everything you need it to. I think Maple Treeway just feels a little bit better, just personal preference-wise. I don't know what else I can say about Daisy Cruiser. Daisy Cruiser, I kind of have remarkably little to talk about. I don't like the underwater section that exists, because it's yet another opportunity of just like an alternate path that exists that isn't better. But I guess it is also one that punishes you for drifting too wide, and it's kind of more of a discouragement than it is an alternate. Otherwise, the track is just kind of narrow in a bunch of places, but otherwise it's pretty damn inoffensive. Like, you can't really go wrong with Daisy Cruiser. It does everything you'd expect Daisy Cruiser to do. Moonview Highway. Alright. Moonview Highway is flawed. It's not good. I didn't like it in Wii, and I like it even less here. So Moonview Highway is a weird case. The thing about Moonview Highway is it takes the idea of like a moving traffic track, and like it's like, okay, it's like it sees like other ones have done it well. It's like, okay, well, like, let's add this element that is absent from every other vehicle track in the game with these bomb cars. And it's like, okay, great. Now I'm getting punished for other people's bad driving, where I can be perfectly in my own lane, minding my business, driving well, and then someone behind me hits a bomb car, and I am the one who gets punished for that. And like, that's a very small thing. That's like one of many things. The more notable problem with it is that items don't work on Moonview Highway, because half of the track is boost panels. And when you have half of the track being boost panels, what that tends to result in are red shells not being able to find their opponents, especially when traffic gets involved, mushrooms having no effect on bringing anyone closer to victory, stars having a minuscule effect, and first place being able to have minimal damage caused by any sort of offensive item he gets hit by, let alone the fact that he's probably not going to encounter any because he's speeding too quickly to see any of them. It's a genuine problem, and Moonview Highway, I think, as a result of this, gets marked as the worst booster pass track, in my opinion. It is a fundamentally flawed track that this game does not help.
But don't just take it from me. Why don't I leave this one in the hands of one of the only 3 people I know that can consistently kick my ass in Mario Kart. Take it away, Venator.
Hey, this is Venator, the resident Dry Bowser enthusiast, and I've been summoned to give my thoughts on Moonview Highway. We all know this track is bad, but the Wii version used to be one of my favorite tracks, so I'm going to go into detail comparing it to Wii on exactly why I think it's bad. When I first played this track on Wii, what I found interesting about the track design was the dichotomy between the first and second half. The first half hits you with some tight winding turns and tricky car patterns all at once, before the track pulls a complete 180 layer in the second half and thrusts you straight into top speed mode. That feeling of managing constant high speeds and barely weaving through every obstacle thrown your way served to make it feel like a constant state of intensity, and I loved it for that. That area of track design isn't present in 8 Deluxe's version. It was made easier here overall, but I don't dislike it just for that alone. I believe the difficulty nerfs made this track objectively worse because the track was designed directly around the high traffic. To give specific examples, there are far less cars now and they move much slower, the boost pads are easier to hit and don't really increase your speed as much relative to your top speed, so that same sense of speed just isn't present anymore. All the unique behaviors of the cars, like the swerving, are gone as well. The straightaways feel especially tedious due to wheelies not being a thing. Even something like this new shortcut they added, while interesting, manages to be a double-edged sword, because this route is so much faster it makes some of the few actual turns this track has obsolete. To sum it up, the problems come from a combination of the nerfed aspects of the track and the fact that 8 Deluxe's engine just doesn't work for a track design like this to begin with. I share TJ's sentiment about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe in that it's always most fun when you're doing something. Because of that, I tend to like the harder tracks in this game. And unfortunately, both the initial challenge and feel of the track have been watered down, and it's left us with a track that just feels more boring than anything. That being said, there is stuff about this track that I still do like. The overall night driving atmosphere and aesthetic is still done very well. The remixes we got may just be some of my favorite pieces of music in the whole game now. Even the bomb cars managed to give a little uniqueness to this track. Throwing an item in a bomb car to blow someone up is one of the most evil things you can do in this game, and it's super fun to pull off. End of the day, I can still enjoy racing on the track by itself, but in the back of my mind, I'm still going to be longing for more of that original challenge that made it special in the first place. Anyways, back to you, TJ. Go and defend my desert tracks.
Squeaky Clean Sprint. This is a weird one. People seem to like this track a lot. I put it in D tier. Granted, the top of D tier, but D tier nonetheless. Because Squeaky Clean Sprint just kind of has a lot of my biggest pet peeves in Mario Kart track design, and kind of puts them all into one standard box. That being continuity from like a place that doesn't feel like it belongs in the Mario universe, that being underwater sections, a good 50% of it is that. That being extremely narrow sections that exist specifically for someone in front of you to back a bomb and to have no consequences for. That being alternate paths that don't have a reason to exist. Because like the first lap has this cool thing where like, okay, you take this glider section, you're on this section, you have this one inside line that is that's really good with the mushroom, and the other route that's normal, and it's like, what's this on lap 2? Oh, you have this bidet that exists that pushes you up to this upper path, but that upper path is so good at being an alternate path that it makes even the shroom cut of the first one completely obsolete. There's no reason to even take the bottom path or to use this shortcut that exists beyond the first lap where it doesn't matter. And it's just like, why? But that's not even where things end. Because after that, after you finish that upper route thing, you'll notice that to the right of the finish line, there's all of these different alternate paths that you can take. Like this plethora of just different ways that you can go, just these other paths that exist, and none of them have a purpose because they are so far out of the way that for the most part, it's just as good, maybe even better, to just take the path you've been taking the whole entire time. All this just resulting in just a plethora of pet peeves that just makes me not like this course.
But maybe we need a more casual perspective on this track. Here's my friend Cassytutu.
First, I'd like to point out that the main thing that I love with this track is that it's a bathroom. Nothing grand or fantastical or anything like that, it's just a bathroom. Which is a silly idea to me that it's humorous. Though I wonder what the homeowner would feel if they found little racers driving around in their own bathroom. Second, I will say that I don't like the final shortcut, where you drive off the higher shelf after the water spout thing from the second lap. It's not a placement that I would consider good, as it's hard to maneuver on at times. Sponges in the bathtub are another thing that I'm not the best fan of. They feel too bumpy, as if they're like uprooted tree roots that you would trip on. There are some fun little things I noticed with this track that I find cute, such as the rubber duck in the bathtub that is Mario's hat, or the Daisy-themed hairdryer on the second shelf next to the toilet. They're just some of the cute little things that I find amusing. I get the trope with the ring being in the drain of the tub, but why? Why is it there? I don't know, maybe they thought that would be funny. And that's it for my thoughts on this delightful track. Now if you excuse me, I'll be giving my cat some pets before he decides to scream at me like a madman.
LA Laps. This is, I think, very much in line with Sydney Sprint, but maybe a little bit better. LA Laps, I think I have lukewarm feelings for. It's a bit narrow, and I feel like you do get a little bit of front run syndrome here, but at the same time, it's also a track that I enjoy racing a lot. And I feel like that gets it out of C tier for me, and is more memorable than New York Minute and Bangkok, because I feel like there's some decently interesting tech you can do where you can mini turbo onto the glider section, then get through that. There's a little bit of depth, not too much, not too little to discourage me.
But those are just my thoughts. What about someone who might be more sentimentally attached to the area?
Ah, Los Angeles, the city of angels, home of many famous movie scenes, popular museums, and numerous food enterprises. Depending on whom you ask, this is either the land of opportunity and potential, or a territory of crime and danger. Regardless of how you may view it, Los Angeles will forever be the hometown of me, Yo Schiller. And so, whenever I see Los Angeles appear in media, I can't help but get a little excited. It's all about perspective, right? After all, that's why you're currently watching an opinionated video about the ranking of every Mario Kart 8 Deluxe track. All this to say, the idea of a Los Angeles-focused track appearing in both Mario Kart Tour and Mario Kart 8 Deluxe definitely intrigued me. And to put things into my perspective, remember that's the key word here, I was kinda let down with Mario Kart's other America-focused course, New York Minute. But of course, this whole section isn't supposed to be about New York. It's supposed to be about Los Angeles. So, when Nintendo decided that they would create a Los Angeles-focused track and that they would then port it to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe as part of the fourth wave of downloadable content, I was certainly intrigued. And then I finally got the chance to play on the track upon its release, and yeah, I think Nintendo did a pretty good job putting this all together. It's certainly a lot better than New York Minute. Now, I wouldn't say that it's the best track ported from Mario Kart Tour, as I personally think that goes to Vancouver Velocity, but I certainly think that Los Angeles Laps is among the better ones. I just wish that they kept the sunset lighting from the mobile version, but it still works well with the daytime lighting too. So there's two ways to approach discussing this course: comparing and contrasting it to the other Mario Kart Tour-centric tracks, and just taking it at face value as a Los Angeles-inspired track. Starting with the former, this track certainly has a more dynamic layout compared to the majority of other tour tracks, and its appearance is certainly a stark, but welcome, contrast to the tour tracks that came before it. Rather than just featuring a few buildings and a sports stadium in the same vein as the majority of the other tour tracks, this one has some variety in the fact that you go from a beach boardwalk setting to a city setting to an industrial setting. But how does it stand as a course on its own? Well, the layout is fine enough. There are places to perform tricks and places to utilize shortcuts, which is more than I can say for a fair share of the other tour-centric tracks. And though Los Angeles is known for its heavy traffic and absurd street designs, I think the lack of cars and more open, straightforward streets here works better. I think that if the streets were more full of sharp and windy turns, like how Los Angeles actually can be, then it wouldn't lead to a great design for Mario Kart. Just as well, I think the lack of cars and more open streets actually works better here. I think if these streets were filled with cars, then the layout would be a bit more clunky. Choosing to have a half-beach, half-city course to represent Los Angeles actually makes a lot of sense, so being able to somewhat seamlessly drive between the two portions works in its favor. The main downside of the course is the final lap in the oil site. On the one hand, Los Angeles isn't exactly known for being a clean city, so having something dirty and unappealing is fitting enough, actually. Otherwise, this portion of the track is definitely unappealing, and as a result, it feels uninspired. Still, no other Mario Kart Tour track really has something like this. Overall, Los Angeles Laps does a sufficient job at representing Los Angeles as a whole, while also being among the better tracks ported from Mario Kart Tour. When compared to the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe track selection at large, it certainly feels a bit more basic and underwhelming, but when taken in isolation, its beach-to-city set pieces and design allow it to stand as a unique track on its own with an above-average track layout that isn't too complicated. And hey, me personally, I'm just glad to see some more West Coast representation in games, especially within Mario Kart. West Coast, best coast, baby!
Sunset Wilds. Can you believe they forgot the fucking sunset? Just kidding. What do you think I am? Basic? No. I'm here to let the fires burn, because this is one of my favorite tracks in the entire game, and I'm tired of pretending that it isn't. Some of the best balance between rewarding its front runners and allowing item play to pave the way for meaningful comebacks. Every single race on this track is thrilling from the moment it starts to the moment it ends. Every single turn invites just enough shortcut potential to pass 2 to 3 people at least, but never in a way that stops a frontrunner from completely losing everything they worked hard to maintain. The moment this track went from being above average to being a cut above the rest was when I learned that you can drive on this tiny sliver of dirt on this corner. Now this is a GBA shortcut. Others will argue that the sun doesn't set on these wilds because they forgot to animate the skybox. I would argue that it doesn't set because your race is never truly over when you race here. Then get to Koopa Cape. Koopa Cape unfortunately kinda gets butchered. I'm not gonna say I dislike it, because I think I still have a warm spot for it. And I think that warm spot is still in B tier, somehow. But they messed up a lot of things with Koopa Cape. It's the 7 version, which means we don't get the spinners, we don't get the proper tunnel underwater, we don't get a shroomless cut that existed in Wii. I'm sure you've heard all these problems before, and I doubt you need someone with 900 hours to tell you they exist, but what I will say is that I think these problems are often blown out of proportion, and I think as a result of that, it's still worth appreciating this track for what it is, and ultimately, that's something that's still pretty good. Unlike Vancouver Velocity, which I feel like does make a lot better use of its elements, I feel like Vancouver Velocity is very comparable to Singapore Speedway, where it's a sort of more narrow track without all that many shortcuts, but the shortcuts that do exist on Vancouver Velocity, they get a lot more mileage. Because there's one shortcut, like particularly in the parking garage, where if you have a large set of mushrooms there, you can speed through a large chunk of people. And I think in general, Vancouver Velocity does a better job of avoiding the encouragement of just boring front runs that can't be contested. It does a better job combating it. It's not immune to it, but it does a better job. But yeah, overall I'd say I have lukewarm feelings on Vancouver. I enjoy racing it, it's fun, I like it. Yeah, no, it does things well. It's good. Rome Avanti. Rome Avanti is a fantastic track, and I'm not just saying that because a friend wrote an entire essay in order to bribe me into placing it higher. And I definitely would not plagiarize their analysis in order to justify that decision. Rome is a track that really understands how to keep player engaged, with a constant balance of drifts and tricks akin to what makes Coconut Mall so great. There is especially large focus on building purple mini turbos throughout this track, which is really not something you see a lot of elsewhere. The Coliseum makes a fantastic centerpiece and an even better tutorial for load tricks. And overall, it just feels like it's a track that understands what it wants to do. Group that in together with just the right number of shortcuts, and I feel like we have a contender for a real winner on our hands here. The only reason I don't rate it higher is just because of the fact that it's not a track that I really find myself thinking about all that much. It's very well designed and everything, but it's just not a personal favorite, and unfortunately, that will keep it from my personal top 10. DK Mountain, you already know. I'm simple. I'm a simple man. If you put in front of me a track where you can make a death-defying leap across a gorge, my pants are already off. DK Mountain plays really well. I really like how it works in this game. I like the section right after the barrel cannon, when you're starting to go down the road, like where you first encounter falling rocks. How if you trick off the ramp correctly, you can land on the space to the right and kind of cut that line even extra tight. I feel like the fact that they smoothed it out is kind of a good thing. It's just that same sort of process they've done for all the other tracks, I think benefits it in the long run. The way they changed that gap jump circuit, I think is really good and feels incredibly satisfying in this game to accomplish. And as a result of that, it is non-negotiably one of the best tracks in the game, even if the obstacles are not as impactful as they could be. Let's hear what Chongo, producer of Lactose Mixtape and lover of Monkey Watch, has to say about it.
Thanks for the intro, TJ. So, I'm an incredibly biased person here. Back in 5th grade, Double Dash with my friends was always my jam, and no level gave us more joy than DK Mountain. Thinking back to when I was a little whippersnapper, this was the first level to feature a barrel cannon like this, which is sick. Having it fire you up to the top of a volcano? Sick. Driving down the rocky mountaintop while seeing the rest of the track laid out ahead of you? Sick. Dodging rocks while navigating tight hairpin turns? Sick. Parts of road being just gone, making you either ride the wall or take a shortcut? Sick. A perilous rickety bridge at the very end? Way better in Double Dash, but still sick! But does it still stand up to this day when it moves over to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and its ilk? Can this relic of a bygone age truly stand out among almost 100 other racing venues of what is considered one of, if not the greatest casual racing game to ever grace? Yes. DK Mountain is peak with a capital P, E, A, and K, and goes into the Super God Monkey Man I Love DK Mountain tier. That's the end of my piece. I end my turn in defense mode or whatever the hell. Woo!
Daisy Circuit? Yeah, above average circuit track. It's good. Not too much, just kind of a bit basic, but like it's a good kind of basic. It's a flavor of basic that I don't feel like we've gotten before. It could do with like one or two more shortcuts, I guess. But honestly, the fact that there's not all too much going on here really does kind of keep things really tame, and just kind of results in a race that is determined by just the bare basics of what you expect a Mario Kart race to be determined by. Good item play, good lines, just all around, just fundamentals at its core, very mildly helped by the existence of these railings that you can drive on. This track really is just Mario Kart at its core. No gimmicks to really bring you anywhere, just a very solid track with a decent amount of curves and some quality driving. To build upon this simplicity, I'll pass this off to Ultima to give a more personal anecdote.
Sometimes a Mario Kart course can be beloved for reasons other than strictly gameplay. It could be the aesthetic of the course, or maybe you have a personal connection to it, and for me, Daisy Circuit Wii fits both of those requirements. Gameplay-wise, it is pretty basic. There's no big crazy jumps, there's no even real any hazards on the course, but the vibe is immaculate. The sunset over the water is gorgeous, and gives the course a very distinct mood. It's also one of the Mario Kart courses I'd love to visit, or just live in general. I also have a personal connection to this course as I used it to test how talking on the phone while driving affected your performance for a middle school science fair project. I chose Daisy Circuit because of the lack of hazards, and there's also cones on the course that you could run over, which would measure a difference between the first lap and the second lap, etc, etc. Now, I had my parents use the Wii wheel and do time trials both on and off the phone, and I compared their times. But, unfortunately, all my effort on the project is only met with an F from my school because I was told video games aren't real life.
Piranha Plant Cove. Piranha Plant Cove really is a track unlike any other in the game. Mainly in the fact that it is the only track that actually does something with the whole underwater thing? What? Yeah, imagine using the idea of going underwater and meaningfully implementing that into how you drive in a gameplay-oriented way that is more complicated than just making you slide a bit more, I guess. This track doesn't have to. It really does demonstrate how Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's gimmicks are genuinely very versatile and that you can do a lot with them, but that all of the tracks in the game don't. At all. Completely unexplored. Back to the course itself, this really is a Mario Kart Tour track that fully lives up to the idea of a Woohoo Island-esque track. Even if these ruins that we explore aren't nearly as iconic as Woohoo Island itself, gameplay-wise it really does take us through a full exploration through these ruins in a way that is entirely engaging and really lives up to the section track gimmick. It has some pretty cool shortcuts overall, it's really fun to learn. The only thing really holding it back in my eyes is just that it lacks that wow factor to really capture my attention. It's absolutely fantastic to race on, it just doesn't completely excite me.
Yo, Wiggler! Okay, guys. So I have a 3-step process to winning on Madrid every time. Step 1, you gotta start the race. Step 2, you gotta stop to admire the Wiggler. What was I doing?
Cyan, what are you doing? You already made a section.
I just want to... Wiggler.
Get out of here.
It's a backing track!
No, the fuck it isn't. Anyways.
Madrid Drive. Madrid is really easy to undersell the qualities of, because it doesn't do a huge amount that's like overly special. My first impression of Madrid was that it was largely spectacle with not as much substance. But I've come to realize that past TJ is a stupid idiot who should never be allowed to cook. Because not only is this track incredible, but I would also say it's a contender for the best city track in the entire game. Insanely fun, easy to follow paths that anyone can keep track of, amazing set pieces all the way through, a really cool, easy to miss glider shortcut, and some of the best damn music in the entire series. The one complaint I can really levy against it is that it does kind of have a few too many straightaways, and there is a small lack of shortcuts and catch-up opportunity, but that's a small price to pay for such an amazing track. Rosalina's Ice World. Rosalina's Ice World is a track that gets a lot more hate than it really deserves, and it'll never be one of my favorites, but I enjoy racing it. Which is a big surprise to me because in Mario Kart 7, I remember it feeling underwhelming. The shortcut they added at the very end is a fantastic addition that this track desperately needed, because after the underwater section, it really did feel like one of the most linear, uninspired, autopilot-y tracks in the entire series. And now at least, there's actually a small amount of comeback potential. Another thing that Mario Kart 8 does that really helps to improve this track is how it uses its half pipes to make this section that normally is inaccessible on lap 2 and 3 still accessible to a good player who can use the half pipes to great effect. It's a small but meaningful skill check that I genuinely think adds a good value to this track. Definitely not winning any awards, but yeah, it's good. Bowser Castle 3. Bowser Castle 3 is probably like an A tier-ish track that I feel like I have no choice but to bump up to S tier, entirely because of the fact that we are just so starved for any sort of Bowser Castle in Mario Kart 8, because even though it has like a respectable number of shortcuts, I feel like they altogether kind of leave a small impact on the race itself. But on the flip side, it has a very large number of routes, and I feel like almost all of them are given a pretty good reason to exist, and genuinely shows a pretty good track being designed here. And not to mention, we somehow managed to get all of this from a SNES remake. And while my reasons for loving this track are really simple, if you need much more detailed reasons, allow me to introduce the final boss of Mario Kart 8 opinions himself. That's right, Mr. Fundamentally Flawed, Sir Musty.
Is that just my legacy now? I'm just a fundamentally flawed guy. Either way, SNES Bowser Castle 3. If there are no fans of this track, I'm dead. An oddly compelling track for Super Mario Kart standards, given the absolute glow-up of a century, setting a fantastic precedent for any other tracks that want to return in the future. And it all comes down to a couple of factors I really like, starting with the initial pick-a-path section. In the original game, there'd be many a reason why you'd want to take different paths. Are you still not familiar with the controls? You can go a bit more outwards. Item boxes don't regenerate in this game, so you'll want to take a different path to grab another item. In this game, they keep it quite simple with the concept of risk-reward. You can take the shortest path with a free item to boot, and everyone loves free. But you have to contend with the metal meshed floor that can spew lava at any point. And also have to watch out for you thrill seekers out there. Me, I'm the thrill seeker, it's me I'm talking about. Simple in its execution, but wonderfully done. And then after a couple of turns, we get into the pillar section, which now you can drive on top of? Sign me up. A rare bit of precision driving in a modern Mario Kart. I really like this section. And before you ascend them, you can choose how you approach. Do you go around these thwomps here to take the slowest but safest path, grabbing a few coins in the process, better giving you space to align yourself to ascend the pillars, or do you take an inward drift like you usually would? Better for maintaining your position, but you might not ascend the pillars with quite the accuracy you wanted. So naturally you're inclined to take the best middle ground, right? And that's where the thwomps come in. Just like in the original game where they're placed in very good spots to really mess up your driving, it's exactly that way here too. If the thwomps are up, then the middle ground option is perfect. You got to maintain your position while also ascending the pillars. But if the thwomps are down, then you'll be left with nothing but a frown. I'm a poet and I didn't even know it. And then you get to the final turn where the thwomps being down isn't the threat this time, it's the thwomps being up, which I've called an excellent use of subverting expectations. With the long-standing series like Mario, there are just certain tropes that you don't even have to explain to the player. If you face a boo, you know it's going to stop. If you pick Toad in the game, you know you're going to be moving a little faster. And the same could be said for the thwomps. For the entire Mario series, you know if you see one start gritting its teeth, then you know you've got beef. So having to avoid the one that's closing his eyes in a dormant state is one of those subconscious elements that, while it might not mess you up when you race in the track now, I guarantee it's had at some point and you just didn't even notice it. And if you don't fancy dealing with this assault on the mind, you got a mushroom shortcut at the end to snag a last minute first place. All in all, this track is fantastically designed, and I cannot wait to see what they do with Vanilla Lake 2 in Mario Kart 9. That's my prediction, TJ. I'm locking it in. It's a fundamentally great prediction.
Yet another doozy. But before I get too into this one, I'm gonna pass it off one final time to my very first rival, Cinnabread.
Hello, I am Cinnabread. Cutting to the chase here, I gotta ask this question. What is Mario Kart? See, throughout these rankings, I couldn't help but think about the amount of time I've spent with this game. No! This series. Growing up as a kid, I recall the days of using Diddy Kong with a Wild Wing. I'd drive the tracks with a sense of enjoyment from personal favorites like Moonview Highway, Daisy Circuit, and Bowser's Castle. No, not that. The good one. But above them all, there was always one track that stood above the rest. A track so magical feeling, so eye-catching and beautiful. A track that, yeah okay, we all know it's Rainbow Road for the Wii. From plummeting towards the planet at the beginning of the course, jumping off the wavy section towards what's essentially an outer space skate park that violates every safety regulation, to jumping into the cannon that's basically a launch star from Mario Galaxy. They even kept the fire from when you fall off the track, which looks better than ever on the Switch. I could gush and go on and on about how this track was difficult to race on the Wii, or how the updated graphics makes it look as vibrant and aesthetically pleasing as strips of RGB lights, or how racing on this track made a huge portion of some of my earliest memories with my favorite Mario characters. But I think we can let this sit here. I'm officially content with calling this the unofficial best track in the game, and we can leave it at that. At least that's what you thought. I just caught you in 4K not looking at the road with your pants down. This ain't a tier list video anymore. You are now a part of the super duper ultra extra special roast of TJ Henry Yoshi. Come on, did you really think you could get away with this? This? What is this? You honestly expect me to sit idly by while I watch you gleefully put Super Bell Subway a whole 5 tiers above N64 Rainbow Road and Ninja Hideaway, a track with some of the worst respawns in Mario Kart history, a whole 6 above Twisted Mansion? Not to mention Donut Plains 3 and Shroom Ridge, 2 of the most bland and boring tracks in the game, being all the way up in S and A tier? It is my goal, no, it is my mission, to stand up for the right opinions that this list deserves. This is what comment sections were built for, but instead of a loosely typed, poorly put together YouTube comment, you get to edit an entire segment in your own video!
Okay, yeah, maybe I should have seen that coming. But anyway, Wii Rainbow Road. This track is the first Rainbow Road in this game that I like. That I think is an actually well-designed Rainbow Road. Because yes, I still defend Mario Kart 8 Rainbow Road as a good track, but I don't think that I am alone in saying that it does not fulfill the criteria to be a perfect Rainbow Road. And yes, a lot of people are satisfied with the remake we got of N64 Rainbow Road. But as we already discussed, to me, it completely misses the mark and the entire identity of its original. And while some find its new identity special, to me, it's a complete and utter travesty of a track. And while SNES Rainbow Road succeeds at doing the bare minimum, namely because it single-handedly made the rules of Rainbow Road, somehow they still made the baffling decision to make it the second track in the cup that it resides in. And finally, while some people will sing the praises of 3DS Rainbow Road, insisting that it's the best track to ever grace the world of Mario Kart, there was never a point where I truly ever saw it in that much light, even if I have come to respect it as a decently well-made track. We arrive at Wii Rainbow Road, which finally succeeds and embraces everything that a Rainbow Road should be. It succeeds at being the final challenge, resting at the end of everything. It actually demands some level of thought from the player racing it. It offers some kind of deeper complexity for players who wish to master it. It completely and utterly embodies the identity of Mario Kart Wii as we think of it. It even succeeds at being the biggest test of endurance that Mario Kart 8 Deluxe has to offer. And it does all of this while maintaining its own unmistakable identity and giving off the ethereal feeling that you expect a Rainbow Road to give you. The type of feeling that gives you goosebumps just from being there and experiencing it. All those parts back when I was talking about what made me fall in love with N64 Rainbow Road, the first version of it. This is it. This is what I was looking for. The sheer beauty of being surrounded by nothingness, where I truly feel one with the vehicle I'm driving, and the road I'm driving it on. And it may sound absurd, but it makes me think of some of the first races I've ever run in my life, where I've pushed myself hard enough to where I genuinely watched the world fade around me, and for the only thing to remain to be the empty space between me and the finish line. There's something magical about watching and remembering that feeling, of focusing so hard that just for a single moment,
the only thing that exists is the road under your feet. But at this point in our journey, you're probably not used to me talking about the vibes, or the aesthetics, or just the general feelings. You're used to me talking about the gameplay depth that a track has to offer. And when Nintendo brought this track back, they knew exactly what people like me were looking for. Because if I ever had any doubt about some of the coolest things in this game that they added, being accidents, seemingly just to show that Nintendo knew about players like me, they featured a clip of one of the players taking a shortcut that I 100% would have been willing to believe was only there by accident. And even though this track isn't as hard as it used to be, and everything that was in the Wii version isn't in this version of the track, it still feels right. It still feels like Wii's version of Rainbow Road. And something I've learned throughout analyzing all these tracks is that sometimes it's okay for things to change. Because unbeknownst to me, by taking away some of this difficulty, they made Mario Kart Wii Rainbow Road do exactly what I wanted N64 Rainbow Road to do, in making this truly feel like a victory lap. Like a celebration of not just Mario Kart 8, but Mario Kart as a whole. So it has one shortcut and doesn't have another. What about the rest of the track? Well, put plain and simply, every single section of this track is fun to drive, and that there are several sections where there are very fun and differing bits of skill expression that you'll get to see from different players. And it does all of this while managing to successfully nail the sense of high speed that you are supposed to get from Moonview Highway, all while actually respecting the item play that we associate with Mario Kart. It truly is everything that I could want from a Rainbow Road. Again and again and again, I have said that a good Rainbow Road needs to be more than just a road where you go, and that you'll know when we get there. And now that we finally have, I hope that I have also been able to convey to you just what that entails. Thanks for watching. So, that's probably the most exhausting series of videos I'll make on this channel. Before I unveil the final way that this tier list wound up, let me give one final thank you to all of these amazing people who agreed to give me their thoughts on these tracks. And if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Now, without further ado, I've kept you waiting for long enough, so here is the final placement of every track in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. With a caveat, because with the time that has passed since I started working on these videos, some of my opinions have changed. But this isn't where things will end, because after this video, I want to make one final supercut where I look at these tracks in chronological order from worst to best. And this is where you come in, dear viewer, because in that video, I am going to be taking any feedback you have left for me on any of these other videos into account, and some of the placements will be different. I am going to update entries that I think are very poorly written, and I will reflect that in the final supercut video, whenever that may be, hopefully within a month or two. But until then, I appreciate you for taking the time to watch, and have a good one.